Um, I cannot think of anything better to wake you up first thing in the early morning than listening to today's first speaker. It's my honor to introduce Barbara Fredrickson. Probably you know her. Okay, Barb is Kennan Distinguished Professor of Psychology and Neuroscience and Director of the Positive Emotions and Psychophysiology Lab at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Her contributions have been recognized with numerous honors, including the Career Trajectory Award from the Society of Experimental Social Psychology and the inaugural Christopher Peterson Gold Medal from the IPA. In 2014, she was identified as the 30th most influential psychologist alive today contributing to counseling psychology. She has published dozens of research papers, has been the recipient of many competitive grants, and also has published several well-known books that have been translated into more than 30 languages in 20 countries. All of these merits are impressive. What her CV doesn't show are some other virtues that are just as important as her many accomplishments. First, the first one is creativity and openness. Rather than being stuck using standard methodologies, Barb is always trying to look at common phenomena like positive emotions from unusual perspectives. The second one is her spirit of collaboration. Her research shows a dense network of collaborations with scholars not only from psychology, but also from disciplines. And the third hidden virtue is courage. We scientists tend to be conservative, and while Barb could probably easily live off of the returns of her already impressive achievements, she continues to push her work to the frontiers of knowledge. And finally, I want to thank her for demonstrating her commitment and bravery once more in accepting to become the next president of the IPA. With her acceptance and her vision, our organization remains in good hands. And I'm sure that she will be a key factor in the continuous flourishing of the IPA. The Italian writer Italo Calvino wrote a wonderful book on classical literature, where he tried to define what a classic book is. He provided many definitions, but the one I like the most is this one. A classic is a book which we each with which each rereading offers as much of a sense of discovery as the first reading. That is what many of us feel when reading some of Barb's contribution to the field. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to give the floor to a classic, Professor Barbara Fredrickson.
Thank you. You're welcome. I appreciated the link of courage to joining in the administrative roles of the society. I also wanted to mention that James had called out Herb Marsh's talk this morning at 10:30. And so between Carmelo, who's current president, and I guess tomorrow becomes past president, I become president, Herb Marsh is our president-elect. So if you want to hear part of the future of leadership of IPA, please attend his talk. So I'm sharing with you work today under the title of Positivity Resonates. And I want to confess that I used that title because I wasn't exactly sure which I was going to be talking about at the start. So it's kind of an umbrella title. But I do want to give a shout out to my team that helps me do all of this work. An ode to the PEP Lab at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. This is a sample of the local collaborative team, my graduate students, postdocs, other collaborators. And the kind of work that I do really couldn't be done by one person alone, and I'll be actually featuring some of the great work of my students in this new presentation. I'm actually, this is the first time I've given this particular talk, so bear with me. I wanted to share with you some of the latest, although know very much that it's a work in progress, and you're getting kind of a snippet of a relatively new idea and some very new data. And there certainly will be more to come to fill in the other puzzle pieces as we move along. So as many of you know, the guiding theoretical framework for my work for many years has been the broaden and build theory. And this will be a sort of a foundation of some of the work that I'll share with you today on a new theoretical perspective that I want to share with you called the upward spiral theory of lifestyle change. And it has a broaden and build thread in it. So I want to just, for any of you who may not have heard about broaden and build yet, I'll give you the nutshell version. And that is that the value of positive emotions for humans is that they do two things for us. As one is in the moment that we experience a positive emotion, it expands our awareness, it expands our peripheral vision, allowing us to see the big picture. We know this from brain imaging, from eye tracking, from behavioral studies, that our brains function differently during those moments that we experience positive emotions. The benefit of that broadened awareness doesn't always show up in the moment that you're experiencing that broadened awareness. There are also long-term benefits as those moments of broadened awareness accumulate and compound. They help build resourcefulness in us, help build our resilience, our social networks, our physical health, our creativity, ingenuity, our overall resourcefulness. So the broaden and build theory has two different temporal aspects. There's a broadened aspect that's in the moment, and then a long-term aspect that is basically likens positive emotions to nutrients that help us grow into better versions of ourselves. So those ideas are presented in positivity and in interpersonal ways in Love 2.0. So here's where the title Positivity Resonates could be taken in so many different ways. In my book, Love 2.0, I talk about how positivity resonates between people so that during these micro moments of positive connection, there's a shared thread of positivity. There's a bio-behavioral synchrony in which two people are kind of moving to the same hidden beat. And part of that synchrony you can see, part of that synchrony is biological that you can't see without special instruments of science. And then there's also kind of a mutual care and concern and orientation. So positivity can resonate between people, and that's a focus that I have offered, in past World Congresses. Positivity can also resonate within people in that this is capturing a little bit of that build aspect of the broaden and build theory, that our day-to-day habitual positive emotions aren't just things that make us feel uplifted and alive and energized. They also change the very rhythms of the heart, creating greater heart rate variability, high frequency heart rate variability, that is a marker of, an objective marker of health. So positivity resonates in terms of its long-term effects on the physical body. I presented the other day in the genetics panel how we also see changes in gene expression in the immune system with habitual experiences of positive emotions. So positivity resonates at a physical level in the very rhythms of our hearts, and in our cells are paying attention as well. But today I want to focus on how positivity resonates over time and links us up to our future selves, and helps us, and how we can use the science of positive emotions to help us do the things that we want to do, to make lifestyle changes in particular. So, and this is the overarching framework that I want to build up to, is this upward spiral theory of lifestyle change, which I described in a chapter briefly in the Advances of Experimental Social Psychology a couple years ago. But this is something that we're continuing to develop and layer upon layer build the puzzle pieces to support. So a few facts about lifestyle. I'm sure some of these facts won't be new to you, but 40% of all premature deaths can be attributable to ultimately modifiable lifestyle behavioral choices. And although I have a picture of smoking and drinking here, it's also, overeating and lack of exercise and other risky behavioral day-to-day choices. So 40% of all premature deaths can be linked to things that we could have prevented if we paid more attention to lifestyle facts. 62% of all cancers. Now, this isn't just lung cancer and smoking. There are many different kinds of cancers that are affected by our physical activity levels and our eating habits. And so lifestyle change is something that the National Cancer Institute is especially interested in, not just about smoking cessation. Other aspects of positive health behaviors are really consequential here too. So we invest millions and millions of dollars in trying to find cures for cancer and other diseases, and the return on investment, I think, would be extraordinary if we invested a portion of that money into understanding how to create lifestyle change, lasting lifestyle change. Okay, we know that this doesn't work, okay? This willpower is not the way to create lasting lifestyle change. If we've had this experiment going on for decades where we tell people through public service announcements, this is how much you should be active, this is the right way to eat, these are healthy behaviors. Has it made a difference? No, because willpower runs out at the end of every day. And that's, Roy Baumeister has done wonderful work to show that that's when bad behavior occurs. At the end of the day, we wake up with some amount of willpower in reserve, and then it just wears out. So willpower and cognitive effort of saying, this is how I want to behave, that's not the way to get to lasting, sustainable lifestyle change. But on the other side, we do know that enjoyment motivates. And this, it doesn't just start like this, where the mule is just captivated by the carrot just all on its own. There's a presumption here that this mule has had carrots before and enjoyed those carrots, and therefore will walk towards carrots. Okay, so there's a lot to this idea that enjoyment motivates that we don't really understand when we just say, well, enjoyment is rewarding. Saying enjoyment is rewarding is just really talking about that small tip of the iceberg, and we haven't really understood why enjoyment is motivating. And so I see the job of my research lab as trying to unpack the causal mechanisms and pathways, biological pathways that help us understand why enjoyment is motivating, because if we can understand those mechanisms and those pathways, then we can better design interventions that capitalize on those specific pathways. So the perspective that I want to share with you is rooted in neuroscience. I'm very inspired by two particular areas of neuroscience here. And I want to give you a short primer on those before I layer in the upward spiral theory of lifestyle change that makes use of these discoveries from neuroscience. One is based on my former colleague from University of Michigan, Kent Berridge's work on the neuroscience of addiction. Now, addictions are really important base for understanding the science of positive emotions because they are hijacked positive emotions, or they are hijacked pleasures in particular. So in this neuroscience of addiction, Kent Berridge and his colleagues have used animal models to decompose reward, and the idea of there being a reward center in the brain into its subcomponents. And there's the newer thinking is that there's not a reward center in the brain, but there are separate liking and wanting and incentive salience areas of the brain. So kind of unpacking what reward is and finding its different neurological substrates. And in particular, again, Ken Berridge works with animal models. He needed to find a way to separate out liking something from wanting something. So he, inspired by people like Paul Ekman, who did facial action coding systems for humans, he basically did the same for rats and found ways to code rat facial expressions when they're enjoying things. Okay, so in this case, it's sugar, a sweet taste. And so humans, mammals, and many other mammals and rats, when they're enjoying something, they lick their lips. Okay, so this is something that's in common across mammalian species. And so he wanted to be able to separate out the enjoyment of something from the wanting of something, or the willingness to work. Okay, so in animal models, that willingness to work is in like pressing the bar in the Skinner box. How willing are you to do that for food or for sweet tastes? And from this work, I mean, this is a drastic simplification, but from this work, Berridge and his colleagues are able to separate out and learn that liking of a phenomena, the enjoyment, is more of an opioid phenomena, whereas wanting it, pursuing it, is more dopaminergic. So there are different brain pathways for each of those. And sitting in between, Berridge theorizes, is this incentive salience. And I just want to underscore that incentive salience is non-conscious. It's not, it's like a perceptual magnetism or a perceptual underlining of the people and objects that have been associated with past pleasant experiences come to loom large in your perception and draw you in to put effort into it, re-experiencing that situation. So one way that this has been studied in humans is to have people estimate, to look at words that symbolize positive things, neutral things, or negative things, and then estimate the font size that those words appear in. And that things that are associated with enjoyment, people estimate the font size is larger. So there's like this perceptual magnetism that is associated with them. It's like they pop out in the environment. It's as if once you've enjoyed something, this is appropriate because we're in Disneyland, right? Every night at 10 o'clock, we have the fireworks. Okay, so it's like as if when you enjoy something, some like little firework goes off and covers the things, the people and objects associated with enjoyment with a bit of glitter dust. So that when you see that person or that object again, it pops out and kind of grabs your attention and motivates you. Okay, so, and this is a lasting learning that, again, is happening all at implicit, non-conscious levels. So for something that you've, one example of this I can say is when my son is, might be sitting on the front porch talking to me, but like a block away sees his friend ride by on his bicycle, and he's just up and off and running. It's not like he has to stop and think, oh, there's the person I know, a friend, I've had good times with him in the past. It's just boom, he's off and running. So there's not a deliberative aspect to this. This is how things that we've enjoyed in the past grab our attention. This is how drugs of abuse grab our attention and keep people locked into them. Okay, next. Okay, so this is one way you could think about behavioral maintenance. That to the extent to which you like something, creates this non-conscious incentive salience, predicts your willingness to work to achieve it, and which allows you to enjoy it again. Okay, so this is a loop of behavioral maintenance. It is also a loop of addiction. Okay, remember, this is inspired by the neuroscience of addiction. Okay, there's another area that I'm very inspired by, and that is the neuroscience of sickness behavior. Sickness behavior is, hopefully none of you felt like this morning when you woke up. I guess you wouldn't be here otherwise. I'm actually extraordinarily grateful that you guys woke up this morning because it's very early, and I thought I could be talking to like one person back here and one over here, so it's really gratifying to have an audience. So the neuroscience of sickness behavior. Sickness behavior is actually a jargon phrase that includes a set of motivations, a suite of motivations and behaviors that I think of as sort of muting the positive emotion system. That's feeling like I don't want to see people, I don't want to expend any energy, I don't want to be physically active, I just want to lay low. The evolutionary theory is that sickness behavior helps us recover from illness and keep from spreading viruses. Okay, so that this energy change that goes with sickness is adaptive. It has nothing to do with being sick, actually. It seems to be the psychology of inflammation. Inflammation alone creates this feeling that you don't want to see people, that you feel disconnected, kind of depressed, and hedonic. And we know that because Naomi Eisenberg and others have done studies that randomly assign people to get an injection that creates inflammation or not. And then you ask people what they feel like doing. They don't feel like doing much. You put them in the scanner. Reward circuits in the brain that have been, identified in work like Kent Berridge's are muted. The reward centers in the brain are just like the volume is turned down on our reward systems. So this area of science had joined up a number of different sickness behaviors and thought they all operate as a suite and kind of rise and fall together with inflammation. And that made me think that, maybe we have something parallel on the other side. Maybe there's a set of wellness behaviors, like being physically active, being social, learning something new, pursuing meaning, eating well, caring for the body. Maybe these as a set rise and fall together depending on our biological milieu, perhaps our levels of inflammation. But the basic principle I was developing here is that biological systems may also amplify the positive emotion yield of certain wellness behaviors, making them increasingly appealing. So it's like our inner biological state, in a way, can be turning up the volume on the positive emotion system, which can make certain behaviors increasingly rewarding over time. Okay, bringing these ideas together into the upward spiral theory of lifestyle change, I'm interested in looking at a suite of different wellness behaviors, and this work has been funded by the National Cancer Institute, the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, National Institute of Nursing Research. The overarching hypothesis is positive emotions create non-conscious and increasing motives for wellness behaviors. And I want to build this up into one integrated model on the next slide. And I know a lot of you guys like to take pictures. Wait until I get the full build on, because then you don't have to do it so many times. I was finding myself in that situation yesterday where it's like, oh, took it too soon. So I'll tell you. Okay, so upward spiral theory of lifestyle change has something in common with the research on addiction, and then it adds in a broaden and build layer. So I want to just start at the initial part. Like, to the extent, let's see, where's my build? To the extent that a wellness behavior, like being physically active, eating fruits and vegetables, meditating, the examples that I've used in research are meditating and being physically active. To the extent that a wellness behavior yields positive emotions, I just want to say as a caveat right there, all wellness behaviors do not yield positive emotions. There are many things that we do for our health and wellness that do not yield positive emotions. So this is only in the case in which they do. The cases in which they don't offer good experimental control for us. Okay. To the extent that wellness behaviors elicit positive emotions, they create these non-conscious motives perceptual magnetism where we're always, or that we have this sort of allure, these people and objects associated with that past wellness behavior come to command our attention and draw us to them. In addition, there's this broaden and build loop. If you just took the center loop, that would be akin to what happens with addictions. But positive emotions actually diverge from pleasures in the way I'm theorizing, and we're collecting data on this now. Positive emotions, I'm arguing, are distinct from pleasures in that they also have this broaden and build path, whereas pleasures can kind of just keep us getting hooked on the same activity over and over again. Positive emotions, because they, oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. There's not an arrow here. Okay, positive emotions, because they broaden awareness and build resources, also increase our flexibility, build our resourcefulness, and some of the resources that positive emotions build, not all of them, some of them bend back and amplify the positive emotion yield of wellness behaviors. Okay, so this is the picture moment. If you wanted to get this one, there are no more builds, is what I'm trying to say. So there's an inner loop to this upward spiral model and an outer loop. The inner loop is the dopaminergic pathway that has non-conscious motives or non-conscious incentive salience as its driving mechanism. And then the outer loop is that pointing out that positive emotions build our resourcefulness. Some of those resources, psychological and biological, end up moderating or amplifying the positive emotion yield of wellness behaviors, which is what creates this upward spiral where our motives for these wellness behaviors become increasingly entrenched and stronger over time. Okay, this is why once you get on a roll with a positive wellness behavior, it keeps on being increasingly rewarding. It's not just that it becomes rewarding, it's becoming increasingly rewarding over time. Okay. So I want to share with you some initial data here. And again, this is a first layer of evidence. We have several larger randomized controlled trials that are all designed around testing this with long-term behavior change over the course of 18 and 24 months. Those data aren't in yet, so I want to share with you just some of the early returns of our research grants where we can see threads of support for the model. It's not testing the whole model at once, but threads of support for it. Okay, so I want to share with you some research that is very much the signature work of one of my doctoral students, Elise Rice, who presented this work in a panel on Friday. Actually, 6 of my graduate students were here presenting their research on Friday. It was such a great day. So yes, give them a hand. They were great. So she's gotten our lab interested in spontaneous thoughts, and particular spontaneous positive thoughts. And what we're coming to find is that we think they are indicators of this perceptual magnetism or non-conscious motives. And you just think about what's always on your mind. They're things that we have potentially enjoyed in the past and looking forward to in the future. When you think about things that are always on your mind, here's, Homer's got the sleep and donuts. And I think about this for myself. One of my hobbies is cooking. And I realize if I was cataloging my spontaneous thoughts, I'm always thinking, what's in the refrigerator? What ingredients do I have that make this? And where did I find that last recipe? Like countless times every day, I'm thinking about ingredients, recipes, and what I'm going to make for dinner. And it's because I love cooking. Okay, so the idea is that the things that we are passionate about, and here I'm very much inspired by Bob Vallerone's work on passion and harmonious passion, and I'll bring that thread into here as well. The things that we're passionate about tend to arise spontaneously within our consciousness. We don't have to deliberately think about them. They pop to mind. And so we measure the things that pop to mind for people. We ask, how many times do thoughts about physical activity just seem to pop to mind? Okay, and of those times, of those thoughts, what proportion of them are positive? We've also done studies that use a more detailed thought listing task where people list all the thoughts that they're having within a 2 or 3 minute bin. Okay, so positive spontaneous thoughts about physical activity, we found that when people have something that they enjoy, so if you enjoy physical activity, you're more likely to have spontaneous positive thoughts about physical activity. And to the extent that you have these spontaneous positive thoughts about physical activity, you're going to be more physically active. This is something that we found in a panel study of about 200 participants where we are asking them how often are you active? And then a separate question, how pleasant did you find each time you were active? And then another time we asked them, again, how often do thoughts about physical activity spontaneously come to mind? And then what proportion of those thoughts are positive? This doesn't work for just frequency of spontaneous thoughts. It has to be frequency of spontaneous thoughts that are positive. Okay. Negative or unpleasant spontaneous thoughts don't follow the same pattern. Okay, so again, weaving in the idea that resources moderate the positive emotion yield of wellness behavior. This is sort of beginning to get at this outer loop, the idea that certain aspects of the person that can be resources that we build moderate or amplify the positive emotion yield of wellness behaviors. We found that to be the case with passions. Okay, so I was trying to find what was the right picture for passion. I just thought, my number one favorite activity. Okay, so if people, one way you measure passions is ask people what their favorite activity was. But another way is to ask about a target activity, like physical activity, and then ask them, give them the passion measure that Bob Valeron and his colleagues have developed. So that's what we've done. And that the extent to which people identify physical activity as a harmonious passion, this does not work for obsessive passions, only the harmonious passions. This is what we had hypothesized because Bob's work has shown that Bob Valeron, in case you don't know who I'm talking about when I say Bob, sorry, has shown that harmonious passions are much more closely aligned with positive emotions than our obsessive passions. So harmonious passions, to the extent to which you're harmoniously passionate about activity, you experience more positive emotions from them. That is actually consistent with much past literature. We also find that the extent to which, if we ask you to think about your favorite activity and then randomly assign you to either think about that in more harmoniously passionate ways or obsessively passionate ways, the more you think about your favorite activity in harmoniously passionate ways, the more we can produce these positive automatic thoughts about that activity. So there's a causal relationship between harmonious passion and positive automatic thoughts. We also find a reciprocal relationship between harmonious passion and spontaneous positive thoughts, such that the more harmonious passion you have and at one assessment phase, the greater your positive automatic thoughts are, positive spontaneous thoughts are, and the greater your positive spontaneous thoughts are, the more you show increases in harmonious passions at a next assessment wave, and vice versa. So there's a reciprocal causal relationship between positive spontaneous thoughts and the building of harmonious passions. And that also, again, the more you enjoy an activity, the more you're going to both increase these positive spontaneous thoughts, which I think are operating as these non-conscious, or a readout of non-conscious motives, and also building harmonious passion. So harmonious passion is one psychological resource that moderates the positive emotion yield or amplifies the positive emotion yield of a wellness behavior, and also one that can be built by repeated experiences of positive emotions. We found the same to be true for cardiac vagal tone as indexed by high-frequency heart rate variability. That in our earlier work that I've presented here before, we found that people with higher cardiac vagal tone get a bigger boost of positive emotions out of loving kindness meditation. And this is perfectly in keeping with the research that links heart rate variability to the ability to regulate attention and emotions. So people with higher heart rate variability have been associated with being better able to control their attention and emotions. Not surprising that they would be better able to regulate their attention and emotions in meditation and get more positive emotions out of it. But we also find that there's a building of cardiac vagal tone that is associated with positive emotions extracted from the meditation. So again, here's a biological resource that sits on the outside, that's something that can be built through repeated experiences of positive emotions that turns out to turn up the volume on the positive emotion system and amplify the positive emotion yield of a wellness behavior, in this case meditation, in ways that can, again, get this dual spiral action going that should facilitate behavioral maintenance. Okay, so this is just to remind me to tell you that, plasticity is all over the body. Plasticity is through the psychological system too. We hear a lot about neuroplasticity, but there's equally plasticity in our other biological systems, gene expression, heart rate variability, and other things. They reflect our habitual behaviors. So as our habitual behaviors are leading to changes in biology, those changes in biology affect our psychological experiences and can knit us to wellness behaviors. So what I'm arguing here is that there is a really critical active ingredient in sustained positive behavior change, and that is our humble positive emotions. That positive emotions aren't just something that make a new exercise routine or wellness routine tolerable. They're actually the active ingredient that's going to predict whether we stick with it years later. And it doesn't matter how many times you start an exercise program. What matters is that you stick with it. And it seems, and what we know already in the science of behavior change is that the predictors of who initiates or what gets people to initiate aren't the same predictors that get people to maintain. So we need a separate analysis to see what maintains behavior change. Okay. So this is actually the graph, the figure that started my thinking on all of this. And that is my former doctoral student, Michael Cohn, had collaborated with me on our first randomized control trial of teaching loving kindness meditation or a weightless control. And he had the idea to just go back to our sample 15 months later and see who is continuing to meditate. This was not in the original plan for the study at all, but we found that for those who were continuing to meditate 15 months later, they had, if you go back and look at what their daily emotional experiences had been like, they were unique in that they had a much bigger positive emotion blast from the activity than people who didn't. So the two colored lines there are those who were randomly assigned to the loving kindness meditation versus the gray, the weightless control. And you can see that the people who didn't continue are distinctly different than the people who did. And so that got me thinking about what is it about that early blast of positive emotions that could predict, it was the single best predictor of whether people maintain the behavior 15 months later. So you might even think that for the people who didn't have a positive emotional experience to it, they should just try something else because it's not going to stick. So So again, we need to find these moderators or boundary conditions of what works in interventions rather than just one size fits all. So this led to a more recent study where we randomly assigned people to learn 2 different types of meditation, one that had a real positive emotion focus and one that doesn't. So we compared loving kindness meditation to mindfulness meditation. I don't have the time to spend discussing the distinctions between them, but we worked with meditation experts to create 6-week workshops that focused on, the core of mindfulness being regulating attention, not with tremendous focus on emotions at all. And the core of loving kindness meditation, learning how to self-generate warm and kind positive emotions. So meditation that evokes positive emotions, we've found, inspires more practice. What's important in this study is that whether you learned mindfulness meditation or loving kindness meditation, you thought your teacher was great, you loved the workshop. It's just that those who learned loving kindness meditation spent more minutes in practice than those who learned mindfulness meditation. So there's, again, the pink and the red curves are the loving kindness meditation, and the blue are the mindfulness meditation. So how do you access this active ingredient of positive emotions and wellness behaviors? What's kind of the can opener to this, to getting the positive emotions out? I want to switch gears a bit and share a little bit of work on what I shared in more detail in the workshop on Thursday on prioritizing positivity. This is work that one of my former doctoral students, Lana Catalino, developed in her graduate program and in her dissertation, and we published one initial paper on this in Emotion last year. The concept of prioritizing positivity is using situation selection as an emotion regulation tool to leverage positive emotions. And I want to it's a very short scale, a 6-item scale. You can find it in this particular paper in Emotions. And I want to give you a sense of the items because it has very different properties than a closely allied scale that sounds kind of similar called valuing happiness. So valuing happiness does one kind of things, prioritizing positivity another. Prioritizing positivity is a priority for me is experiencing happiness in everyday life. I look for and nurture my positive emotions. What I decide to do with my time outside of work is influenced by how much I might experience positive emotions. We used to have a work item in there, but it didn't hang with the rest, so it wasn't correlated with the other items. I structure my day to maximize my happiness. My major decisions in life, the job I choose, the house I buy, are influenced by how much I might experience positive emotions. And I admire people who make their decisions based on the happiness that they will gain. I give you all of these items because I want to give you a sense of the scale. It's kind of a proactive situation selection to amplify positive emotions. This scale functions very differently from a related scale by Iris Maus and her colleagues called Valuing Happiness or Valuing Happiness to an Extreme, which has items like, I am worried about my happiness even when I'm happy. So it kind of has this extra neurotic edge. But we find that our scale predicts increases in positive emotions or higher positive emotions, and their scale predicts, as they had found in their past work, a boomerang effect, that you actually excessively valuing happiness is actually backfires and is associated with reduced positive emotions. This prioritizing, this more proactive way of arranging one's day to experience positive emotions seems to be more effective in actually getting us where we want. We find that it also, so the previous findings were, going from a self-report scale to self-reported positive emotions. It's been important to also show that this prioritizing measure shows up in non-self-report measures as well. We find that it predicts the degree of smiling or smile contagion. So the people who prioritize positivity are more likely to show a smile in response to another person's smile, as measured by facial EMG. It also has been associated with behavioral effort. One of my former doctoral students, Christian Waugh, developed a task that's kind of like the Skinner box task for rats, to try to separate out liking from wanting. So where people have to click on a moving square on the computer in order to unlock a cartoon. Okay, so it's like the food pellet becomes a cartoon that's either funny or not funny, because they took the funny captions off and just made it a picture. And the amount of work is how many times they would click a moving square to get that. So we find out how much effort people are willing to put in to experience positive emotions. And people who prioritize positivity put in more work, will work to feel good, okay? And then think about that. I mean, if you want to have a dinner party, this is an example that Lana Catalino uses a lot. If you want to have a dinner party because you really enjoy spending time with your friends, it actually takes a lot of work. You got to go to the grocery store, you got to clean your house, you got to do, there's a lot of unfun things to create a fun thing. People who prioritize positivity are willing to do that. And they also stick with wellness behaviors, new wellness behaviors that are characterized by positive emotions, and I'll show you some data on that in a moment. Actually, I'll show you some data on that now. This is a lead up to the slide I was thinking of, is that we find that people who score higher on prioritizing positivity, if you give them a meditation, these are people who've never been exposed to meditation before, you bring them into the lab and expose them to meditation, they enjoy it more. So there's a correlation there. But this is even more interesting to me. Prioritizing positivity predicted more engagement in that new wellness behavior. Here it was meditation, to the extent that that meditation evoked positive emotions. So here was a study where we brought a couple hundred people into the lab. They were all novice meditators. They'd not meditated in any serious way before. And we randomly assigned them to either experience mindfulness meditation or loving kindness meditation. Again, the aim was to give one meditation that had positive emotions in it, one that didn't, so that we could test this upward spiral theory. And then we had measured people's prioritizing positivity scores previously. And so the behavior type, red or blue, is whether it's loving kindness or mindfulness meditation here. So it's either emotionally neutral or emotionally positive. And we find that the higher you are in prioritizing positivity, further along on the scale, the more you are likely to spend more minutes 3 weeks later engaging in that new wellness behavior. So in this study, it's important to know it was a 3-week-long study, but we didn't tell people they had to meditate. We just exposed them to meditation and sent them home with some guided meditations on a little iPod. And we said, it's up to you whether you want to listen to these or not. It's not part of this. It's not a requirement of the study to meditate. But if you're inspired to, here's a resource. And then 3 weeks later, they came back in with that iPod, and we measured how often they accessed the tracks. Okay, so that's our measure of their behavioral engagement. Again, if the higher on prioritizing positivity and you didn't get a positive emotion boost in the meditation, there's no association. But if there's a positive emotion boost, it works. Okay, just a few other tantalizing correlations that we've found as we're pulling together a grant proposal to look at the role of prioritizing positivity in physical activity. We found that higher scores on prioritizing positivity are associated with investing more time in muscle strengthening activities. That's just a correlation, but it's a tantalizing one. It's also correlated with having a lower waist circumference. So again, we think that prioritizing positivity might be functioning as this kind of a can opener that allows people to find positivity in their daily activities, and then that way create some sustained habits. So these are just little threads of correlations that we're trying to use to build the case to study this further. Okay, And also, I think prioritizing positivity can be a target for interventions or a resource that we can build. We've seen that it moderates the positive emotion yield of a wellness behavior. Now, can we build it? Now, we've done one-time laboratory studies to try to do this. And one way to build prioritizing positivity is to share with people the true facts about the science of positive emotions, and also kind of the pitfalls along the way. So we did this in using a technique that's often used in social psychology. You give people a news article that you've created that's either introducing the idea of your independent variable, here prioritizing positivity, or serving as a control. Our control news article mentions positive emotions just as many times to make sure that we're not just priming positivity, but it just talks descriptively about what lights up in the brain with positive emotions, but doesn't really tell you what you might want to do with that. So our news article goes like this. What's the best way to organize your day? Scientific evidence suggests that when making decisions about how to spend your time, you should take into account your potential to experience positive emotions. Growing evidence suggests that good feelings lead to good health, yet research shows that if you simply will yourself or wish yourself to feel positive emotions, it can backfire, making you feel worse. By contrast, this is the fictional part, a recent study by Andrea McDevitt from University of Arizona, that's the part that's fiction, finds that people who devote time to activities that generate more positive emotions fare the best. They experience more vitality, less stress, lower levels of inflammation in the body, a biological indicator of physical health. Setting aside time for feel-good activities then may be as vital to your health as eating your vegetables and staying active. So if people are exposed to that idea and then asked to move on to a different study, we find that what they think is a different study, they spend more time savoring. This was not savoring food, as she's doing here. This was kind of savoring beautiful visual images. This was a technique used by Jordi Quadback. And we asked people to give us tell us which of these next award-winning photographs is your favorite. Okay, and so they're in sequence looking at 5 different award-winning photographs, and we're surreptitiously measuring how long they spend on each photograph, and that time is increased if you've raised this idea of prioritizing positivity. We also find that people allocate more time on their weekend to pleasant events. Here after that manipulation of prioritizing positivity, we asked people, what's on deck for Sunday? What are you going to do on Sunday? And they gave us the list of what their Sunday was going to entail. And then later we had them rate, they gave us the time allocation to each. And later we had them rate how much pleasantness they would anticipate in those activities. And they are blocking off more time for pleasant activities. And in our current studies, we are, we get them back a few weeks later and we ask them, okay, what did you do that Sunday? So we'll get not just behavioral intentions, but their behavioral reports as well. And we're also working to develop more long-term interventions that really talk much more thoroughly about how to prioritize positivity, how to use this proactive emotion regulation or by situation selection to increase more positive emotions in daily life. What's really important to know about situation selection as an emotion regulation technique, James Gross and others have found that this is a much more effective way to regulate your emotions in this proactive situation selection way than in a kind of a willpower way. I gotta make myself feel this way, at a response-focused or emotion regulation. So just wrapping up here, I'm thinking prioritizing positivity is also one of these resources that can be built that moderates the positive emotion yield of lifestyle change and can get this cycle going. So just to wrap up here and echo what the upward spiral theory of lifestyle change is arguing is that positive emotions create these non-conscious motives that, again, grab us in at an implicit level and those non-conscious motives can become increasingly strong over time and knit us to a variety of positive wellness behaviors. So which to deploy, willpower or positive emotions? We say, grin and bear it, or just do it. Maybe we should be saying just enjoy it, or really be thinking about, don't even start a new wellness routine unless there's positive emotions woven into it. And so it might help us rethink. Now, there is a role for just pushing yourself really hard. If you really want to be an Olympic athlete, you might need to do that other route. But if you're just looking to maintain a wellness behavior, it might be a very different set of motivations we need to use. So positive emotions, I'm arguing, light the path to lifestyle change. And I thank you for your kind attention and being here this morning. Thanks.